I work for an industrial laundry company from home. That's what I'd tell anyone who asked. But that's just the story I'm given. My real job is much simpler. Every Friday night, I put on my best suit, head to a downtown theater, take a seat, and watch a performance. That's it. A couple of hours a week, and I make 6 figures, with benefits. It sounds too good to be true, right? Anyone would kill for a job like mine, at least until they find out what kind of performances I'm made to attend. I'm a good person, though. I donate to charity, I volunteer at the food bank. I've never hurt anyone in my life. So how could you call me a sinner, just for watching? This all started 3 years ago. I was desperate for work, and the offer seemed perfect. The instructions were simple: attend a performance at the theater every Friday night. Bear witness, they said. That's all they asked of me. It felt like a scam at first, but what did I have to lose? If it was a pyramid scheme, I'd just walk out. The first time I went, I was stunned. The place was packed with people dressed to the nines, all of them my co-workers, apparently. Everyone handed over their phones at the door, and security patted us down to make sure we didn't have any distractions. No distractions, no diversions, no lapses in concentration, they repeated. You are here to bear witness. I should have walked out then, but I didn't. Maybe it was the crowd or the allure of easy money. Whatever it was, I stayed. The theater was breathtaking, like something out of an old movie. The stage, though, was strange. Wires stretched across it like a spider's web, connected to some kind of mechanical system I couldn't make sense of. But I shrugged it off, thinking it was part of the show. That night, the performance was a concert by a small orchestra. Young, nervous musicians, probably students. They played well enough, and for a while, I lost myself in the music. But then I noticed something. The performance was going on too long. There was no intermission, no break. The musicians looked exhausted, and the audience started to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Something was wrong. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the stage. "Continue performing!" The wires on stage trembled, vibrating ominously. The musicians straightened up and kept playing, even though some of them looked like they were about to collapse. Then it happened. A violin string snapped, hitting the player in the eye. Blood poured down her face as she clutched her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The wires moved faster than I thought possible. In an instant, they wrapped around her neck. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, her head dropped to the floor, followed by her hand and the bow she'd been holding. The audience gasped, but no one moved. No one dared. "Continue performing!" the voice roared again. The rest of the musicians were too terrified to stop. They played on, their hands trembling, their faces pale. Some tried to run, but the wires sliced through them like they were made of air. The stage became a butcher's block, bodies falling one by one. The worst part was the silence from the audience. We just sat there, watching as the performers were slaughtered in front of us. Some of them screamed, begged for help, but we did nothing. We were too scared, too conditioned. We were there to bear witness, after all. The orchestra dwindled, and soon there were only 2 left, a man and a woman. They played a duet, ignoring the carnage around them, clinging to each other as if nothing else mattered. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The voice was in my head now, commanding me to watch, to never look away. Eventually, the woman's hand slipped, her fingers too weak to keep playing. The wires came for her too. Her husband didn't flinch as her body fell to the ground beside him. He just kept playing, his eyes empty, as if he had already accepted his fate. And when he too could play no more, the voice spoke one last time. "Bear witness." I sat there, drenched in sweat, staring at the carnage on the stage. I wasn't alone. No one in the audience moved, no one left. We were all trapped, bound by fear and guilt. Now, every Friday night, I return to that theater. I sit in the same seat, and I watch. Because that's my job. That's what I'm paid to do, and no matter how much I hate myself for it, I'll keep going. Because in the end, I'm just watching. My name is John Miller. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a small apartment in Denver, Colorado. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, and most days, I'm glued to my computer. The past few weeks have been tough for me. Sleep has been scarce, my appetite has all but disappeared, and I've been feeling lightheaded constantly. Still, I needed to get this story off my chest. Lately, I've been hooked on watching unsecured CCTV feeds. It's kind of a strange hobby. I know, but it started out innocently enough. I'd put on random feeds while I ate lunch, watching everything from quiet suburban intersections in Ohio to a small convenience store in Kansas. It gave me a sense of the world beyond my tiny, suffocating apartment. Then, a few months ago, I stumbled across a new feed that changed everything. It was from a camera outside some warehouse, located in what seemed like an industrial area in the Midwest. There was nothing unusual at first, just the side of a building, an empty street, and a row of pine trees in the distance. It was snowing lightly, the first snow of the season, and I found the scene calming. But then I saw them, people in lab coats, a long line of them, at least 30, walking silently toward the forest behind the warehouse. None of them were dressed for the cold, but they moved in perfect unison, single file, without hesitation. It was strange, but I shrugged it off, thinking it was just some kind of work-related task. I bookmarked the feed and went back to my day. The next day, at the same time, I checked the camera again. The snow had piled up more, but sure enough, the same group of people appeared, walking the exact same path. No expressions on their faces, no sign of fatigue, just the same silent march toward the trees. I started watching the feed every day. It became a strange kind of obsession. Every day they appeared at the same time, walking the same path without any change in their routine. By the third week, I was desperate for answers. Where were they going? Who were they? I even kept the feed running in the background while I worked, hoping I'd see a car or something that would give me a clue about their location. Then, 3 days ago, everything changed. I was ready for my usual lunch and the appearance of the scientists, but when they showed up on screen, I couldn't believe what I saw. They were burnt, horribly burnt. Their lab coats were blackened, their skin charred and peeling. Some of their faces were just bone, with skin barely hanging on. I felt sick, my stomach turning at the sight. I couldn't understand how they were still walking, how they were still alive. But they kept marching, just like before, moving as if nothing had changed. I wanted to believe it was some kind of prank, maybe bad camera quality or a glitch. But the more I watched, the more I realized it was real. I had to do something. No one would believe me without proof, so I decided to record the next day's procession. When the time came, I hit the record button, but as soon as I did, a blizzard hit the area on the camera. The snow was coming down so hard that it was impossible to see much, but the scientists still marched through it. And then something happened that made my blood run cold. The last scientist in line stopped, right in front of the camera. They turned and looked directly into the lens. I couldn't make out any features through the burnt skin, but I knew they were looking at me. Slowly, they shook their head. It was a clear message. Stop watching. I was frozen in place, staring at the screen, unsure of what to do. My apartment was warm, but I felt ice cold. When the scientists finally disappeared into the forest, I stopped the recording and tried to play it back. Nothing. The video was just a series of frozen frames, nothing but pixelated snowstorms. It was useless. I tried again the next day, but my internet was down. When I called the provider, they told me it had been cut off due to suspicious activity. I was placed on hold for hours before being told the police would contact me about it. I'm writing this from a small cafe downtown, using their Wi-Fi. I haven't gone back to my apartment since. I don't know who those burnt scientists are or why they're marching every day, but I'm certain they know I've been watching, and I'm terrified they're coming for me next. I haven't eaten all day, and though I'm starving, I can't bring myself to touch the food in front of me. Every time I try, all I can see are those charred faces, marching silently through the snow. My name is Mark Johnson. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I never thought I'd be the type to write something like this, but here I am. I don't know what else to do, and I can't explain what's been happening. My wife, Sarah, and I decided to take a trip up to this cabin her family owns. It's deep in the woods, totally off-grid. No internet, no phone service. The perfect place to disconnect. We figured it'd be a nice escape for a week, just the two of us, no distractions. But now I'm starting to regret it. Everything was fine at first. The drive up was long, winding, the forest around us dense and untouched. It was peaceful, in a way. The cabin itself is old, creaky, but it's charming in that rustic kind of way. The first night was normal, just a bit chilly, but we lit a fire, huddled under blankets. Sarah seemed happy, laughing and talking about how she used to come here as a kid. I felt relaxed, thinking this would be a great break from our usual routine. Then the weird stuff started. It was our second night when I woke up to the sound of whispering. At first, I thought Sarah was talking in her sleep, which she does sometimes, so I didn't think much of it. But as I sat up, I realized her side of the bed was empty. The door to the cabin was slightly ajar. I rushed outside, calling her name, panic already creeping in. She was standing just beyond the porch, barefoot in the snow, staring into the woods. Her breath was slow and steady, like she was in some kind of trance. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. She turned to look at me, her eyes glassy and distant. "I heard them," she said softly. "They were calling for me." A chill crawled up my spine. "Who was calling you?" She just pointed toward the tree line. "Them. They're out there." I didn't know what to say. I tried to get her back inside, but she resisted for a second, like she didn't want to leave. Eventually, she let me pull her back into the cabin, but she didn't say much after that. She just kept staring out the window like she was waiting for something. I figured she must have been sleepwalking, maybe had a nightmare. But it didn't feel right. Something about the way she was acting unsettled me. The next night, it happened again. I woke up to find her standing at the window, staring out into the dark woods. She didn't say anything this time, but when I asked her what she was doing, she just whispered, "They're getting closer." I tried to snap her out of it, but she barely responded, her eyes still fixed on the trees. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching us. Last night was the worst. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of voices. Dozens of them, maybe more. They were faint, coming from the woods, but I could hear them. Men, women, even children, all talking at once in hushed tones. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could feel it. They were watching us. Sarah wasn't in bed. I found her outside again, deeper into the trees this time. She was standing with her back to me, perfectly still, surrounded by footprints in the snow. But they weren't her footprints. They circled around her, leading off into the woods, but none of them matched her boots, or any human boots for that matter. They were small, like bare feet, but twisted, misshapen. Some looked like they had too many toes. I ran to her, my heart racing. "Sarah, we need to go back inside," I said, my voice shaking. She didn't move for a second. Then she whispered, "They're here." I felt it then, like 1,000 eyes were on me from every direction. My skin prickled, and I swear I saw something move between the trees, something low to the ground, crawling. I grabbed Sarah and dragged her back to the cabin. I locked the door, shut every window, and blocked them with whatever I could find. I don't know what's happening, but I'm scared. Sarah's barely speaking to me now, and when she does, she mutters about them coming closer. I don't know if she's sleepwalking, hallucinating, or if there's really something out there. The worst part is, I've started hearing whispers when I'm alone. Soft, barely audible, but they're there. They're out there. We're supposed to stay here for a few more days, but I don't know if we're going to make it that long. Something is wrong with my wife, or maybe with this place. Either way, I feel like we're not alone. Should we leave? I'm scared to find out what happens if we stay. My name is Ryan Carter. I'm 29 years old, and I live in New Haven, Connecticut. I've been working as a part-time home nurse for a few years now, mostly taking night shifts for elderly patients. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills, and most of the time, it's just quiet. Until that night. The sound of police sirens wailed loudly inside the room, but the old man didn't move. He sat there in his chair, surrounded by stacks of dusty books, staring through the TV like nothing outside existed. "So, is there anything else I need to know?" I asked curiously, watching him. His eyes were half closed, almost as if he were asleep, and his wiry, uncombed hair stood up in every direction. His beard was long, with small patches of drool caught in it. He looked so disconnected, like he was in another world. "Nope, that's pretty much it," Bailey said, her voice tired. She stood beside me, fiddling with her keys. "He just sits there all day watching these police shows." I glanced around the cluttered room. "He sure has a lot of books," I remarked, walking past a stack on the floor. "Yeah, he was some kind of scholar or archaeologist. His son hired us to take care of him, but the old man doesn't talk much anymore," she replied. "Let me show you to your room." I followed her down the hallway. The walls were dark blue and the floor was covered in worn-out hardwood. We passed several rooms, each more cluttered than the last. Books were everywhere, stacked on shelves, tables, and even the floor. She led me into a small bedroom with lime green walls. The bed had dark gray sheets, neatly made, and a small lamp sat on a nightstand. "This is you," she said. "It's a simple job. Just make sure he's fed and take care of him if he needs anything. But he usually just falls asleep in front of the TV." "Got it," I said, setting my backpack down and pulling out my phone charger. "You said you already fed him dinner, right?" "Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Just make him some fruit and yogurt for breakfast. Easy enough." Bailey checked her phone and smiled. "I'll be back in a few days. Call me if anything comes up, but it probably won't. He's harmless." With that, she left. The door clicked shut, and the house felt eerily quiet. The only sound was the muffled noise of gunshots and dialogue from the TV. I peeked into the old man's room again. He was still there, his eyes now completely closed. A quiet snore escaped his lips. I decided not to disturb him and headed to my room. After getting settled, I lay in bed, scrolling through my phone. I didn't think much of the job, just another night in another strange house. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to a creaking sound. The room was pitch black, and I blinked in confusion. I thought I had left the door closed, but it was now slightly ajar. I sat up in bed, listening carefully. "Hello," I whispered, but no one responded. A scraping noise echoed through the hallway. It sounded faint, like someone dragging their feet. My heart started to race as I got out of bed and tiptoed to the door. I peeked into the hallway. The old man was gone. The TV was still on, casting a faint glow down the hallway, but the chair where the man had been was empty. I stepped out of my room, my breath shaky, and slowly made my way toward his. As I got closer, I heard another noise, a soft chuckle. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood frozen in the hallway. The sound was coming from his room. When I reached the doorway, I peeked inside. My stomach dropped. The old man was standing in the middle of the room, holding something in his hand. His eyes were wide open now, and his mouth was stretched into a strange grin. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, but then I saw it. He was holding a knife. My mind raced, but my body wouldn't move. The old man shuffled toward me, his feet dragging across the floor. His grin grew wider, his eyes locked on me. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place. You don't have to do this," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond. He just kept coming closer, his knife gleaming in the dim light. I backed up, my heart pounding, and turned to run. I sprinted down the hallway toward the front door, but I could hear him behind me, his footsteps shuffling faster. The front door was just a few feet away when I felt something sharp graze my arm. I screamed, throwing the door open and stumbling outside into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I reached the end of the driveway. I turned back, panting, my whole body trembling. The old man stood in the doorway, the knife still in his hand, watching me. His grin had faded, replaced by a blank, emotionless stare. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I never went back to that house. The police found him sitting in his chair, watching TV like nothing had happened. They told me later that he had a history of violent outbursts, but his son hadn't mentioned a thing. I still can't shake the feeling that if I hadn't run, I wouldn't have made it out alive. My name is David, I'm 32 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb about 40 minutes outside the city. My street has only 15 houses, and I know almost none of my neighbors. The only person I talk to occasionally is John, who lives next door. I work as a data engineer for an insurance company, which means long hours and a lot of commuting. By the time I get home, it's usually around 8 p.m., and I'm completely drained. On weekends, I like to practice photography, which is one of the few things that helps me relax. Last Wednesday, after an exhausting day at work, I had a team dinner with my colleagues. I'm not much of a social person, so I was already feeling drained before the evening even started. By the time we finished dinner, it was 9 p.m., and I had a long drive ahead of me. There was also an accident on the highway, adding another 30 minutes to my commute. It was almost 11 p.m. by the time I finally got off the highway and onto the dark, quiet roads leading to my house. As I was driving through the empty streets, I passed by the small church near my home. It's an old building, rarely used except for the occasional funeral. Something about it always felt off, especially at night. That evening, it looked particularly eerie. The way the moonlight hit the stone walls made me think it could make a perfect photo for my portfolio. I pulled over, grabbed my camera, and took a few shots. When I reviewed the photos in my car, I noticed something strange. In one of the images, after adjusting the lighting, I saw a bike parked near the church and a person sitting on a bench. But when I looked back at the bench, no one was there. The sight made me uneasy. It was late, and there was no reason for anyone to be sitting outside that church at this hour. Curiosity got the better of me. I got out of the car and walked towards the church. The bike was still there, but the person was gone. Then I heard it, muffled chanting coming from inside the building. I knew I shouldn't have, but my tiredness and curiosity pushed me to investigate further. I quietly walked around to one of the windows and peeked inside. I couldn't see much, just a small side room. Still, I could hear the chanting clearly now, coming from the main hall. I hesitated for a moment, then walked to the front door, gently opening it. The chanting grew louder as I stepped inside. The church felt colder than it should, sending a shiver down my spine. I peeked into the main hall, and what I saw nearly made me scream. 6 people, dressed in black, stood in a circle around a young girl tied to a chair. One of them was John, my neighbor. My heart raced as I watched them chant something over her, their voices rising with each word. John, the same guy who smiled and waved at me every morning, was part of this. Before I could fully process what was happening, a man entered the room holding a staff. He seemed like the leader. The others turned to him as he approached the altar. The girl was shaking, and I could see tears streaming down her face. The leader raised his arms and said, "We offer this sacrifice for our freedom. May it be accepted." Then, they each took a knife and cut their arms, letting their blood drip onto the girl. I was frozen in place, horrified. And then, without warning, the leader plunged his knife into the girl's stomach. I couldn't stop myself. I yelled, "No!" Immediately, all heads turned toward me. John's face was blank, emotionless, as if I were just another inconvenience. I bolted for the door, hearing footsteps behind me. I reached my car, slammed the door, and sped off. I could see someone chasing after me in the rearview mirror, but I didn't stop until I was safely home. The next morning, I found a letter outside my door. It read, "You are invited to the church's 350-year anniversary. We hope to see you there, David." I don't know what to do. John knows where I live. They know my name.